G'day, Stu from UAVfutures here, and today, well, we're going to be opening such a can of worms. So this is the review, the 5-inch drone from TBS. It's called the Oblivion. It's plastic fantastic. It's very strong and does some kind of interesting things that I haven't seen before on UAVfutures. So that's what I want to show you guys. But if you read the title of this video, the review Joshua Barwell was too scared to do. And he makes some really good points. Now, I'm 100% on JB's side. I'm good friends with him. I talk to him all the time. And he did a Facebook post. People were wanting him to review the Oblivion, but he said he wasn't going to do it because he felt like it was lose-lose. If he said some critical things, he was worried people were just going to say, oh, you're always too critical. It's just because it's TBS. You're always slagging off Trappy and TBS. And then if he said positive things, he was worried people think, oh, you're just sucking up to TBS on the other hand. So it was just lose-lose. Now, I think that's a real shame, and it says something about those really vocal people in the community who always think there's a hidden agenda rather than just JB. He wants to do his service. He wants to do a review for you guys, for the viewers, and that's what I want to do as well. Now, there's no hidden agendas. There's nothing like this about this review. I want to give you the right information and find out, is this the right drone for you? And if you've got it, what can you expect? What's it going to fly like? All that sort of jazz. Now, I actually went out, and I don't know if it's a bit of corporate espionage or something, but TBS is a big company and TBS can make a lot of noise. And Trappy, I know you're going to be watching. In the past, I've always recommended, especially your VTXs, you know, I couldn't count how many times I say the TBS Unify is a fantastic VTX. Their crossfire system does some amazing stuff. So this one, to be honest, I wasn't too sure if they would be happy with me reviewing it. So I actually went out, I bought this under a fake name, got it sent to one of my mates' addresses, and we're going to be sticking it on the bench and finding out what we're going to be looking at the text and the specs. This is the part 1. We put it on the bench, and the part 2, a little card should pop up here. That's where we take it out and fly it around. Now remember, this is just my opinions, and I know that there's going to be a lot of controversy for this. I just want to do it for those fans out there, my viewers, my Patreon supporters. They want to know what this drone is going to be like. And yeah, I just know there's going to be a bit of heat because of the things that might be said or whatever we say about this. Anyway, I guess I'm rambling because I'm a little bit nervous, but let's stick it on the bench and get started. I'd love to know what you think of the TBS Oblivion. All right, let's do it. Alrighty, here it is on the bench. We're going to go through the complete overview, the bench breakdown, but first things first, you're going to notice it's plastic and it does look very different. I kind of really like the look of it. It's black, it's stealthy. It's going to be hard to find if you lose it, but I do think it looks very, very cool. Now, you get a couple of different extras, so we're going to go through some of those boring bits. You know, you've got some GoPro mounts we'll talk about, little prop changing tool, a motor holding tool, so we'll get those out of the way. If you buy the kit, there's a couple of different versions. I'll link them down below. Some come with a radio. I just got the bind and fly with a spare sort of FreeSky receiver in there. You get a couple little things like some, I guess, percentage off, what is this, Velocidrone and the Sims. You know, this is what's 5% off. I don't know. If you want to redeem this code, if you're the first person, you want to buy Velocidrone, there you go. Redeem that code. You might get yourself a bit of a discount, but we'll put that to the side. What we've got here, let's talk about the goods. Let's talk about this unit. So I'm going to put the props to the side as well. They're just some HQ, the V3s. I think they're the 5x4x3s. But what we've got, oh, you also get a spare canopy. So this one's for the GoPro. It's all solid molded carbon, molded plastic, I should say. We'll put that to the side. Got my low profile prop nuts. But what we've got here, this is the unit. It's a 5-inch racer. It's designed to be very, very easy, very accessible for pilots to get into the hobby. It's got things like bullet connectors. You can see it's made out of plastic. It should be fairly robust in a crash. I actually think you've got some good motor protection. You have to do minimal soldering. And the only part I had to solder was my receiver. So I soldered that in. It uses like the TBS agent, which is a little bit easy to get set up and get flying if you're not familiar with Betaflight. But it's not going to be for everybody because some things in here are very different. And I think it's not really going after the hardcore racer. It's aimed at getting people into the hobby, but it's also coming in at a pretty expensive price. You know, it's up around the $300 US mark, which is a lot, especially when we go through and have a look what we've actually got inside. So I'm going to unscrew it now and put this to the side, and then we'll take the canopy off and have a look at the actual internals. So I'm going to take this little Velcro part off underneath. This is what's used to hold your battery, and if it's just me, I find this bit a bit of a pain in the bottom, trying to, you know, Velcro strap it up with this, unless I'm doing it wrong. I don't really like that. I think it just adds a bit of weight. I just much prefer a Velcro strap on the back. But to take the canopy off, you just undo these little screws at the back right here. There's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you can simply slide your canopy off. So let's do that now. Cut back to what it looks like once I've done that. Alrighty, so I've taken the top off. You can see I did put a little zip tie on here to protect my battery lead. Didn't want to rip off the pads, but we've taken the top off and we're going to start at the outside in. But first things first, let's talk about this plastic frame. So it's just an injection molded piece of plastic, and I really do like the frame. I'll link that down below. I think it's about $30 or $40, which to me feels a little bit overpriced, but I know TBS, they are an expensive store. You know, they do a lot of research and that sort of stuff, but it is very expensive for what you get. But that doesn't mean that I don't like it. You know, this plastic, I think it's not going to be as stiff, but I do think it's going to hold up pretty well. Like it might bend and flex, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think in some really hard crashes where carbon would snap, this thing just might bounce. So that's pretty cool. If we flip it underneath, you can see it's all just one piece, all very strong. We've got our little motor protectors on the outside as well, you know, so you're going to sort of be protecting your motors. I do wonder, is this thing going to get caught in trees a little bit more? Because you've got these big gaps, you know, if you're flying around, is it going to get stuck a little bit more? But the frame out of the way, you've also got this little bit, of course, that clips on the top. But let's talk about these motors. Now, these are 2205. I think it's 2400 kV. And just in flying this, I feel they're really not going after the performance with this drone. You know, it says it can do 120 miles per hour, and we'll check that out. 120, kilometers per hour. Let me rephrase, 120 k's per hour. But these motors, they're a couple of years behind, or that's how it feels anyway, in terms of raw performance and raw thrust. Now, moving towards the middle, you can see something that's very different. We've got some bullet connectors here, and that's because this is designed for people. You can see it's running through the arm. There's a little channel in here. That's where this is designed for people. They don't like soldering. They just want to be able to build their drone. If they need to do some repairs or get a spare motor, hook it up, they can do that with minimal soldering, because it's trying to, I guess, get people into the hobby as easily as possible. That's what this drone is going after, and I think, you know, it does that pretty well, besides the price. Now, in the middle with the stack here, of course, I've got my own little receiver, because I bought a version where I could just solder in my own receiver. But what we've got our little power cube, and on the top we've got our Colibri F3 flight control. This is part of the power cube, which is this little stack that you're seeing right here. Really, really nice little thing that I think TBS does. It's nice and compact, or it used to be anyway. Nowadays, it's sort of running into some stiff competition, because I feel like a bit of the stuff in here is a little bit outdated. Our ESCs, we've got 2 boards of 2 ESCs, so 4 ESCs in total, 2 on each board, and they're only 25 amp ESCs, which is a little bit lackluster. And then underneath, we've got our TBS Vision underneath. So, and it does have smart audio, all that sort of jazz built in. The VTXs of TBS in the past have been really, really good. You know, things like their Unify, all that sort of stuff, I really, really like. And then on the back, you can see running out of that, you just got a little pigtail. This is for your SMA connector, for your little antenna that you get that goes on with your Oblivion. Now, on the opposite side of the antenna and the VTX at the front, this is we've got our FPV camera, and this is like a special TBS Oblivion one. And we're going to find this out in the part 2. I thought it'd be well protected, but I actually had one crash and my little camera ring broke. So that was kind of annoying, because it wasn't even a bad crash, but we'll talk about that more in the part 2 part of the video. But look, the camera, the colors were nice, all that sort of jazz. And then I guess we can move on and talk about the design. I like it. I like how it looks. I like they're doing plastic. I like that it's beginner friendly, you know, and I think when you've got the canopy on here like that, it's a pretty cool, interesting looking drone. It looks very mean, very menacing, but it also looks a little bit like a toy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, some of the other components, you can see you do get these little mounts that sort of clip on. There's each, I wish they were a bit steeper angle actually, but one's for your normal GoPro, one's for your session. If you don't even want to run a GoPro, you can just put on a pretty normal sort of canopy, and it does protect your components relatively well, except for that little break I had with the camera. Now, let's move on and talk about the designer thing. And I think for plastic, it's interesting. Well done, Trappy. Well done, the TBS team. I like the idea of a plastic frame, and I do think it's a little bit expensive for the frame, and you know, how much does a bit of plastic cost after you've got your R&D costs back, all that sort of stuff. But for a beginner drone, I think it does it well. You know, it is accessible. The components in here, it's not going to be crazy performance, which it says, well, you know, I do have a bit of a bone to pick when it says, I don't know if you guys can see this, capable of winning pro league races. Well, To quote Trevor, that's just a crock of beep. You can imagine what he would just say right there. That's not what this is about at all. That's a little bit misleading because it's not about performance. I like the design, I like the shape, but in terms of the design choices of the components in here, it feels a little bit dated. Like the ESC is only 25 amps. The motors, you know, they're, I hate to say it, a little bit lackluster. You'll see that in the part too. So, but design in terms of protection is great, and the frame design in terms of the components they put in here, I'm not the biggest fan. I do like smart audio in there. I think that's great, but you expect none less from TBS. Now, another design feature, you know, keeping to that beginner-friendly thing, the bullet connectors. Most pro pilots hate them. We got rid of them a long time ago, but that's not who this is after. This is after those beginner pilots who really, really dislike soldering. So I think that is actually a good choice because that's what this entire thing is going after. But if you do want to get the bind and fly version, you do want to get your own version. You know, I did have to solder in my receiver just there. You can use a little plug, but it's going to be difficult to get some of your receivers, especially with FreeSky, to match the little plug at the front. Now, I guess moving on to the quality of the thing. TBS, exceptional quality. I've got to give them 10 out of 10. They have great customer service as well, which is something, if you're interested in that, they do a very good job there. And the solder joints, the way everything, well, there actually really isn't many solder joints, but the way everything goes together is very, very nice. The one part I was a little bit shocked though, if they're making these as sort of ready to rock and roll kits, all this wire at the back, it's really in the way, especially when you're trying to put this canopy down. So they need to get their wire lengths, they need to readjust those because you don't want all that hanging out the back. It makes it a little bit tricky, especially if these things are meant to be simple out of the box. Put your canopy on, you're ready to rock and roll. So that part, that's my only quality concern that I have with this. Now let's move on, talk about the pros and the cons of the TBS Oblivion, and let's talk about some of the pros out of the, first. Well, I like the look. I like that it's trying plastic. I think it's going to protect your internal power cube very well. The camera, well, we didn't, you'll see what happens to that in the part 2 video. And then it's very easy to use. It is very beginner friendly. I do like how, you can change your sort of motor wires all there. All that sort of stuff is great. Beginners to get up, get flying works very, very well. Now let's talk about some of the cons though. Some of the things I didn't like, and some of the things, to be honest, I'm a little bit scared to say versus the wrath that comes back towards the channel from TBS. But let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my opinions, all that sort of stuff about this drone. The con, I don't like the price. I feel like for what you get for some outdated gear in here, in my opinion, in terms of motors, performance, raw performance thrust from the drone, it's just not enough. I'd feel like it's, it's like 2 or 3 years behind, especially when you're paying about $300 US. There's a lot better performing options out there. And granted, some beginners with oodles of cash might be happy to pay for that. And if that's you, and you don't mind doing that and spending your money on a drone like this, well done. I think that's your market. But I wouldn't be buying this drone for the price, for the performance. But I guess I'm not their intended audience. Some other cons, well, I did break the camera, or the little ring here, which is a little annoying. After a relatively simple crash, I might have just got unlucky. We'll find about that. I think it's going to get hung up in the trees. They need to clip this little bit towards the back. The manual, every time I tried to sort of Google the manual, which is on the side of the box, made for beginners, it kept going to the TBS Tango page. I'm not too sure what's going on about there. Maybe I was just doing something wrong, not reading enough, but it would be nice if it just went straight to an Oblivion sort of quick start guide, at least when I was scanning a little QR code on my box that I've got anyway. And especially if you're designed for a beginner, that part's a little bit annoying. There was no clear instructions that I had to plug this thing into Betaflight, change my UARTs. I couldn't do that very easily without sort of knowing what was going on and some of my prior experience. So if you're a brand new pilot, a beginner, it wasn't as easy to get up and get flying like TBS makes it out to be. But look, that might just be me, and the TBS agent wasn't performing as nicely as I was hoping. It was sort of getting hung up a bit. That bit could just be bad luck on my computer and my half, though I've never had any other problems when trying to use it. Now, another bit of a con I had is when the canopy's on here, you can see just how close the camera is right here. It's very hard to get some maximum tilt because it keeps clipping back into the little stack there. You can see if I get that out of the way. You really don't have too much room for some more tilt. So when you're trying to zip along, I feel like most pilots, they're just going to try and crank it to max. So that part, look, if it's meant to go, there's no way you can really fly this at the speeds that it states with that angle because you're just staring at the ground all the time. So I think that needs to be fixed, or they need to put a bigger, a wider lens anyway if you want to keep this same angle. And then the only other little thing I would like to add, and look, this isn't really a biggie because I would like it in terms of just if they could put a zip tie around here or something, because that in a crash, beginners wouldn't know, but if you plug it in, it might jettison out, it might rip out your little battery lead in there, and then you're all out of luck. You're not going to be having a good day. So with all that said and done, I guess, look, it's going to be controversial. I'd love love to know what you guys think for a 5-inch bind and fly racer. It does do well for beginners, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot of things in here I'd like to change. And for the money, you kind of want to get those things right. So that's what we're going to find out in the part 2. We're going to take it out, rip it around, you know, give it a crash test Cal, Grumpy Trevor, and they actually do have some different things to say about it. I think Trevor sort of slams it. Cal's a bit more of a fan about it, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Do you think it's worth it, and would you be getting one? Alrighty, so there it is. There's my part 1, my bench breakdown, my review of the TBS Oblivion, and overall, look, I think the plastic frame is actually pretty cool. For the price of the frame, it probably doesn't cost TBS very much to produce whatsoever. I think it's good. It's not overly expensive. It's not super cheap as well, when it must be a couple of cents in terms of pumping out one of these injection molded frames. So I feel like maybe the frame could be a little bit cheaper. And the components in here, they're okay. But, you know, things like multi-shot, and I'm worried about the motor protection is okay, but what about the cooling? How's it going to hold up in crashes? All that sort of stuff is something we're going to really have to find out in the part 2 review. Now, I'd love to know what you think. A big one for me is the price. I mean, for what you actually get in here, TBS makes some great stuff, but they make some really expensive stuff as well. And I know, look, please, let's just keep it about this drone review. I don't want to open the can of worms, that are the hateful comments that might be coming in, because JB definitely has some points when he talks about trying to review things from TBS. But what do you guys think about this drone? And I'm just going to leave you, I'm going to put a little poll here, or put your comments down below. Based on the components in here, do you think that this bind and fly is worth it? And maybe that'll be some feedback to TBS as well, to find out what people think of this drone. Now, I really do like the, you know, the soldering part. Some people might be saying, oh, it doesn't even, you know, those bullet connectors, pointer failures, all that sort of stuff. I kind of like that, because look, not every drone, you know, we need a drone that might be suited for beginners that just want something that is very easy to get into. And if you've got oodles of cash and you don't like soldering really whatsoever, you know, and you've got to put your receiver in, that part's a little bit trickier. But, you know, if you want to do minimal soldering, then it does have a place. It does have a market for some people out there. Is that market going to be large? I'm not too sure. Anyway, what do you guys think? Subscribe for more FPV related content. Drop your comments down below. And as always, happy flying. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page, because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAV Futures family, there's things like bonus Velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.